Ladies and gentlemen, RosterWatch Nation, welcome back to the epic RosterWatch Podcast, brought to you by RosterWatch.com. My name is Alex Dunlap, and joining us today, once again, the deplorable and the disgusting trash man. We're going to go over some free agency stuff. We're going to go over AmonrastBrown, who, as we speak, is undergoing his USC Pro Day. Also talk about the newest release of the Best Ball Cheat Sheet, version 2.0, post wave 2 of free agency. Trash man, what the hell's going on, brother?
Not a whole lot. Enjoying the frenetic weather here in Austin. It's up and down.
Do you think people enjoy coming on here and hearing our small talk about the goddamn weather in Central Texas?
They should. It's wonderful out here. That's why all these California. Well, that's not why all these California.
I have a very good idea of why the Californians are moving out here, but I'm very afraid that if I talk about my reasoning, I will indeed get canceled. So let's just go ahead and move on. First, guys, if you like the podcast, please, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, leave us a comment, smash the thumbs up button. And if you're listening in Apple Podcasts, thanks to all the reviewers lately, we could definitely use more. Please rate and review. If as many of you rated and reviewed this podcast as listened to this podcast, we would have literally probably on average like 12 times more reviews than we do have per pod.
So we'd have 12 reviews.
Something like that. So I can't believe that only like 1/12 of regular listeners to listen to every single podcast, or the number of people to listen to every single one of these pods, only 1/12 just take literally 3 seconds just to scroll down and hit the stars. It's crazy. So please do it. All right. AmonrastBrown, wide receiver, University of Southern California, came in a little bit smaller than we thought. The initial, and we just got a 40 time. Okay, so what do you think, Trash Man? What do you give me on the over/under for the 40 for AmonrastBrown before we even get to anything else? Because the unofficial times have now been put out there by the powers that be.
Well, I mean, I think you run in mid-4s.
I think it's gonna be mid-5s. It's
mid-5s.
Yeah, it's a 4.51. So we'll adjust that from the pro day time to probably a 4.55 or 4.56. And that is AmonrastBrown, who measured in a little bit shorter than we thought. He was listed at USC at 6'1". He looks like the measurement, we'll have to wait for the official thing here because all we've seen is media reports, but it's 5'11 and a half, 197 pounds, which is good. He was listed at 195 at USC. The 4.56, let's just add on the 0.5 to normalize it there. Not necessarily what I was expecting. I was more expecting kind of more like high 4.4s. If you were expecting mid 4.4s, I'll get your breakdown of AmonrastBrown here in a second. But the burst looks good. He'll come out of this thing with a good burst and explosiveness score, 38.5-inch vertical. So when we look at that versus the 2020 combine, of course, we had Donovan Peoples-Jones that had just the most ridiculous explosive measurables ever with the 44.5-inch vertical. But other than that, we had Henry Ruggs and Jalen Reagor with 42 inchers. Chase Claypool had a 40.5-incher. And then Brandon Ayuk jumped 40 inches. The only two guys other than those players that jumped higher last year than AmonrastBrown just jumped at USC would have been Chris Fink from Notre Dame and Tyree Cleveland from Florida. So, looks like probably a top, he would have been top sort of 20, would have been like an 80th percentile guy at that last year. The broad jump was also good, 10 feet, 7 inches. So you and I did the math before the pod. So 10 times 127 inches. So the guys last year that would have jumped better than him in that category, we mentioned Peoples-Jones, we mentioned Ruggs. Reagor had a better jump, but it was a better jump than Claypool or Ayuk. It was a better jump to Tyree Cleveland that had the higher vertical than him. And other than that, all we have is Denzel Mims. Looks like Desmond Patton.
Well, it'd be like a 10 foot, almost 10.58. So
what?
Well, I was 10 foot 6 inches right then.
10'7" was the jump. 10 feet 7 inches, so 127 inches, right? Unless am I doing that completely wrong?
Well,
120 inches and 10 feet.
It's 127 divided by 12. It's 10.58.
Okay. Oh, all right. So right, if we're doing it just in a decimal form.
Yeah.
Understood. All that, so it kind of goes a little bit with what I see out of Amon-Ra St. Brown on film. You're not going to see a burner in him. To me, I haven't looked at your write-up yet, Trashman. I'm not sure with the new height whether or not this is actually going to jive quite as well. But my comp is a little bit lazy, but it's been the comp the whole time. It's been Juju Smith-Schuster. To me, they have very similar styles of play. They look a lot the same. Maybe it's the USC jersey.
Well, that was one of my comps. The other was Golden Tate.
Okay, so tell us your breakdown about Amon-Ra St. Brown. We'll get to all that in my thoughts, all that in the stuff that I add into these evaluations here during the day. This will be up over at rosterwatch.com for our pro members by this evening once I get done with my work. But I'd like to hear what Trashman has to say.
Well, he's got really good hand-eye coordination. He really adjusts well to poorly thrown balls. He comes down with contested catches. And for being, only 5'11", he uses all of that leaping ability to come down with balls. He's an alpha competitor. I think more so than his brother. I mean, I think maybe because he is smaller, he just has more of that dog in him. Like he's not terribly fast, but he's quick out of his breaks. Like you said, you notice some explosion there. He moves really well laterally on tape. He has some concentration drops, but for the most part, he's got pretty sticky hands. And he's not what I would consider like a twitch, athlete, a twitchy athlete. But with his measurables that we've seen from his pro day, and you said what he had, like a 20, he bench pressed 20 times.
Yeah, he said he wanted to get 25, but I mean 20 is good. I mean that's strong.
Yes, so he's a smaller guy who packs a big punch, and he takes that to his blocking as well. He's an effective blocker, which I think in the NFL can get you on the field sooner than otherwise. And so he's a smaller type of player, but he's got a lot of dog in him, and he knows how to get open. He knows how to score touchdowns too. He's good in the red zone, especially with a lot of those contested catches. And then that's kind of what reminded me of, those players for me. He's a smaller guy, but he still manages to find the end zone over the middle, oftentimes, like a Juju Smith-Schuster or a Golden Tate at one time.
If you combine his best season along with the truncated season USC played in 2020, I mean, his production score comes out pretty well versus some of these other guys. I mean, as far as the context of his offense, he certainly had better production than it's kind of hard with Jalen Waddle, because with Jalen Waddle's case, we talked about this before. It's like he was finally getting his chance to look like he could be an alpha. Then he gets hurt during this last season. And prior to that, we only have, comps of Jalen Waddle playing in the same offenses like Henry Ruggs and Jerry Jeudy and everything. So it's hard, but it's hard with that. But, it's the same level of production basically as an Amari Rodgers or we talk a lot about Dwayne Eskridge. It's the same level of production. It's better production than Kadarius Toney within the context of his offense. So all in all, good production for Amon-Ra St. Brown. I remember the first time I saw him was speaking of Jalen Waddle, it was those two guys that I came out of. It was the Army All-American Bowl down in San Antonio their year. And those two dudes were just different than all the rest of them. And it's funny, you could tell some of these guys you could tell really young, but those were the two that I had written down that I said that were just like my guys from that particular few days of practices. Very, 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 very special players at the high school level. And as you mentioned, another son of John St. Brown, who was Mr. What was he?
Universe?
Mr. Universe. Has the most interesting names for his sons that could ever be imagined. Very interesting takes on picking your partner in life too, from John St. Brown that I've heard him talk
I
about.
haven't heard anything about that.
Very, very, very interested in making sure that your offspring are very, very beastly. That's something he's real into. So I think that he did a good job with that. I think that Amon-Ra St. Brown I think there's 3 of these sons, right?
He doesn't lack in confidence. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So 4.55, a little bit slower than I thought for Amon-Ra, but you've done your preliminary work on Rashad Bateman. How do you stack up Rashad Bateman? You don't have to do the whole breakdown on him, but how do you like Rashad Bateman better than Amon-Ra St. Brown?
I think,
or do they even belong in a tier together? I've kind of been of the thought that I have a hard time. For me, Rondo Moore and Rashad Bateman, I kind of lump in as the guys that after, in Dynasty or just as I'm stacking up rankings, really pre-NFL draft, after, Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle, I feel more comfortable going to like a Rashad Bateman or a Rondo Moore at that point. I'm not sure if you have any thoughts about Rondo Moore only weighing in. I mean, Rondo Moore was only 5'7" at his pro day, but did blaze in the 4.3s and had rocked up drills everywhere else.
Bateman. I mean, he's a more prototypical kind of X receiver than a Amon-Ra. I think he's bigger, he's taller. I think he's about as fast, if not maybe slightly faster than Amon-Ra. I think he's more NFL ready, perhaps. I mean, he's a really good route runner, and I think he's going to play better in the pros than he did in college. He reminds me of the Allen Robinsons and Robert Woods of the NFL. You
hear that Allen Robinson stuff a whole lot because he's, Big 12 or I'm sorry, Big 10 kind of prototypical X wide receiver coming out. I like that one too for Rashad Bateman. We'll have his profile up on the site soon. And I went to mock draft. Well, I'm looking at Juju's measurables from his combine. He was 6'1", 215 at his, so he's bigger. But here's the thing. The 32 and a half inch vertical, so 6 inches less on the vertical than Amon-Ra St. Brown, 120 on the broad, so 7 inches less on the broad, and then 15 reps on the bench. So what I think we have in Amon-Ra St. Brown is a smaller but more twitched up and more rocked up version of Juju that plays in a lot of the same ways. I just wanted to look real quick. I wonder what Steve Johnson, because Steve Johnson was almost 6'2", so that's not right either. But that 40 is right around the same time, 210 pounds. Steve Johnson I always thought was a good comp for Juju. I don't know. I'm gonna have to do more. Now that we have the height, we have the weight, we have the speed. I'm not sure that Juju is going to be the best comp for Amon-Ra St. Brown. It always felt a little bit lazy because they were both USC guys. So I'll think about that during the course of the day today. All right. Speaking of Juju, we have Trashman. The first thing you did this morning was you sent me a text, and then when I didn't answer your text immediately, you called me up. I wasn't even awake yet, and you said, "Dude, we need to talk about the best and worst free agent landing spots for these guys." And I said, "Trashman, you are pumped up about this. I am too." What the truth is that our marketing
last night.
What the truth is that our marketing overlords tell us that those are the hot keywords. So before we get into that, I just wanted to go over a little bit here of the version 2.0 of the best ball cheat sheet. Some of the changes that were made, and I just wanted to see what you thought about it. For one, I'm back very comfortable with Aaron Jones now that we know he's going back to Green Bay, especially now that we know that Jamal Williams has moved on to Detroit. I don't think that A.J. Dillon is capable of biting off a pass catching role in that offense in the same way that Jamal Williams was, with how much they love to use him on third downs. Now, I think that A.J. Dillon will be used in certain ways, but I kind of think that they might kind of save him for the snow games or for later on in the season when they need that big Mack truck. Aaron Jones should be in position all the time to score fantasy points. He should be used more in the receiving game. The only problem, as we know, is that Aaron Rodgers just really, really does choose to feature Davante Adams when he gets down there to the goal line.
Yeah, but you did have some really, like 2-3 touchdown games from Aaron Jones last season on occasion. And the thing is, there really aren't many other playmakers for the Packers right now. I mean, theoretically, they will draft at least a couple of receivers this draft, but
they'll never draft a goddamn receiver. They'll never draft one. They don't care.
I was thinking that Amon-Ra St. Brown would actually make a good fit in Green Bay with his brother.
He'll have to be around his brother that won't stretch and always wants to like. Do you think that Amon-Ra St. Brown also believes that cheetahs don't stretch, so he doesn't have to?
I don't think he's not as athletically gifted as his brother, so I feel like he maybe feels like he's got to do what his brother.
I think the Packers have had enough of this damn St. Brown family. What about Josh Jacobs? How far do you have to move him down now that Kenyon Drake got picked up and paid by the idiotic Raiders? They dismantled their whole offensive line.
They've lost their best receiver, and Nelson Aguilar. I feel like I think they could both potentially thrive there. I mean, I think there's nothing that Derek Carr would love more than to not have to throw the ball more than 5 yards to his pass catchers. So Jacobs and Drake could get theirs. I don't know.
Do you like Josh Jacobs? I mean, what about?
I don't like him as much as I did. I mean, he's
of course not.
He's not. I would put him. What is he? Is he a late second round pick?
No, not for me. I mean, in the late second round, I'm looking at guys. Dude, I mean, look at who all is going to be around in the late second round of your best ball drafts. You're going to have guys around like Joe Mixon and Antonio Gibson and DeAndre Swift and J.K. Dobbins and Miles Sanders. And then wide receivers like Michael Thomas is going there now. DeAndre Hopkins, A.J. Brown, with everybody that's left there.
So you feel better about Miles Sanders than you do about Josh Jacobs?
Yes. How could you not? They just paid Kenyon Drake $14 million?
Oh, and I'm sorry. I'm thinking Myles Gaskin for some reason.
Well, I certainly feel better about all these idiots than Myles Gaskin. Yeah, I feel better about all these guys. No, Miles Sanders, the good Miles.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, Myles Gaskin at the 2-3 turn, trash man. Okay, so what about Chris Carson back to the Seahawks? Is that all of a sudden? Do you want him more than Josh Jacobs?
Yes. I mean, that's not all of a sudden for me.
You would have wanted Chris Carson just hanging out there in the wind with no suitors anywhere? Yes, that is all of the sudden. He's back to Seattle. That's all of the sudden. That was a change. Like, we didn't know that he was headed back there.
Well, we didn't know. I'm just saying him in Seattle.
In general, you've always liked Chris Carson in Seattle better than you've liked Josh Jacobs in Las Vegas. That's fair. So I'm going to actually make an update here because I think you're right. I'm going to duplicate this sheet so I can make a change, and I'm going to move Miles. I'm going to move Josh Jacobs down, and I'm going to move Chris Carson just a little bit up. But I would assume that I'm just assuming that you like do you like David Montgomery and James Robinson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, those guys better than Jacobs too?
Yes.
What about Travis Etienne? Sight unseen as far as landing spot.
I mean, why not?
Yeah. Okay.
I would probably rather take a flyer on them than like a Josh Jacobs in an offense that, from what I've seen, isn't improved.
Do you think that with Kenyon Drake gone, that like how much can we trust Chase Edmonds? Where are you comfortable with pulling the trigger on Chase Edmonds in one of your fantasy drafts right now before we know if they address the position in the draft, or if they do any kind of, I mean, there's still some weird kind of free agents hanging out there. The James Connors. I don't think James Connors is going to go there, but there are still some free agents kind of hanging out. Is Chase Edmonds? Are you comfortable with 203, 205 pound Chase Edmonds as somebody? Where are you comfortable taking him?
As a third running back
/ flex. So I have him priced in right now at the beginning of the 6th round. Do you think that, so around the same time you would start looking at wide receivers like Cooper Kupp or Courtland Sutton or maybe Tyler Boyd? Does that feel about right?
Yeah.
Okay. Right there in that area of wide receivers, we've had this whole deal with, hey,
if I was taking a zero running back approach, then Edmonds is the kind of guy that I would target.
Kareem Hunt, Melvin Gordon, Chase Edmonds, these kinds of guys. Do you think that Brandon Cooks hard to talk about just because the whole Deshaun Watson situation is kind of hard to talk about? I just don't even know why I don't see why this isn't the biggest story in all of the news. I don't know.
I mean, in large part, it's still a lot of it's still conjecture. Well, there's a big story in Colorado.
There's conjecture.
It's not
the sports news. The sports news, trash man. And dude, if there were conjecture about, I just think that. Look, there's conjecture all over our goddamn news media all the time. I just can't believe it. It's like now it's up to how many women. Clearly, we don't have anything to say about innocence, guilt. Like clearly, we live in America, and everybody has the right to, to defend themselves. But it's like this is kind of weird. It's kind of
weird. But at least what I've read, it seems more like he seems more like a flasher than like someone who's actually
it's still so bad. Like it's not like 6 of one, half dozen of the other. It's like it's enough to where the NFL is going to say this is a bad look. He could put on the commissioner's exempt list, like AP did that one year whenever he did there was the whole
spanking thing.
Yeah, it's like there could be something like that. It's like this has to, with Will Fuller gone now. I was thinking like this is wheels up for Brandon Cooks, right? But this has to factor into what we feel about Brandon Cooks.
I guess so. Well, my big conspiracy theory is that the Texans put this out there themselves.
That's an idiot. Like most conspiracy theories, that's idiotic. Like you can't. Who would think to gather up like two dozen masseuses and get them all with this lawyer? Look, man, Deshaun Watson's hired Rusty Hardin. For those of you guys that don't live in Texas, you should know that Rusty Hardin's a dude who gets dudes off, man. He's
that may not be the right way to phrase
that. Oh, Jesus, especially not in this context. No, you know what I'm saying. Rusty Hardin's good. But this dude Busby, he's winning right now, the public perception battle. And with the NFL, perception weighs much more than intent or any reasonable, perception is what they care about. So I'm worried
too, just like Watson has been such a poster boy for the NFL up to this point. It's
the only thing that franchise has going for it. Can you believe that after they fired Bill O'Brien, who had taken this thing, basically lit it on fire on his way out, literally left him with no draft picks, gave him David Johnson instead of DeAndre Hopkins, get like all this stuff. It signs these bad offensive line deals, like ships away good players and leaves them nothing to do with it. And they come in there and they're like, they see the fire and they try and like set the fire on fire. Like how can it get even, I can't believe it. What's going on here with the Texans and this Deshaun Watson stuff just further cements all of that. What do you think about Brandon Cooks in Houston, knowing what we know about Deshaun Watson or what we don't know? about Deshaun Watson versus versus Will Fuller now in Miami with your favorite quarterback Tua Tagovailoa.
Well, I mean, what we know about Cooks is that he's a bad quarterback's best friend. I think,
Brandon Cooks is he's always good. He's been good, man. Like I was just the other day, whenever I was just thinking about this and where I need to put Brandon Cooks as looking like he's going to be the number one after the Miami thing. I just looked at Brandon Cooks, over the course of the last few years. Brandon Cooks is always surprisingly solid. He's probably usually undervalued in fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, and he's a guy who can play. I mean, he can play underneath. He can go out deep if you need him to. I think it can be utilized in a lot of different ways. I think he would have made a better fit in Miami than Will Fuller, potentially with a quarterback like Tua.
Can you believe that Brandon Cooks, only in 2019 in his second year with the Rams, is averaged less than double-digit fantasy points in PPR? Going back to 2014, I mean, he was really overlooked in that historic class. 13.9 fantasy points per game, 15.9 fantasy points per game, 15.4 fantasy points per game. He leaves New Orleans to go to New England, 13.7 fantasy points per game. He leaves New England to go to the Rams, 15.2 fantasy points per game. And a bad year in 2019 with 8.4 fantasy points per game. In 2020, back up to 15.5 fantasy points per game. Brandon Cooks he's been a great player. I'm just, if you look at those quarterbacks, he did have 3 years of Drew Brees. He had 1 year of Tom Brady. He had 2 years of Jared Goff. He's had 1 year of Deshaun Watson. So I'm not sure that narrative's right, that he's always been a bad quarterback's best friend. He's the kind of player who could be a bad quarterback's best friend.
I mean, that's more so what I mean. I mean, he's just the guy who can produce for you really in any situation.
Any thoughts about Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool now that Juju's going back to the Steelers? Should they come down a little bit? Because they were kind of going, those guys are going, fifth-ish round right now. I'm not sure that all those
the way
guys.
That offense is running, I mean, they were still doing better than Juju. And there's still every week, red zone warriors. So I feel like that offense is kind of leaning towards being. I mean, it's a receiving offense now. It's at least it was this last season. I don't see much changing there. Yeah, so I still like Claypool a lot. I mean, you're not going to get him at the value you got him last year. Absolutely not. And then,
yeah. But
Deontay Johnson, I mean, and if Deontay Johnson's healthy the whole season, he's going to be better than he was last year.
But so I think Deontay Johnson won't be healthy through the whole game.
Maybe
any given week, that dude leaves.
But theoretically, both of these guys should be valued more than they were last year for those reasons.
And Juju valued less.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's get on to it. The drum roll. You're a drummer, trash man. Give us a drum roll.
If I do a drum roll, this camera's gonna shake.
Okay. Yeah, man. I think the booties in the audience will shake too whenever trash man gets behind the kit. As long as he's not trying to do it in a weird time. Where the girls don't understand what the dance moves are. Okay. Favorite. Let's go over our best and worst free agency landing spots. Let's go with the best ones first. Let's say how many did you come up with? How many best and how many worst?
I mean, it's a big there's a big gray area there for me. There weren't many that were just like obvious best. I think Curtis Samuel to Washington. I think that's one of the better ones, at least for him.
Yeah. Better for that offense too.
Yeah.
They're fast. They're going to be fast.
He could
Curtis
be
Samuel's
the primary pass catcher for that offense. And and working out of the backfield too.
He's not going to be the prime. Come on, trash me. He's not the primary pass catcher. That's Terry McLaurin. Curtis Samuel can't even beat out DJ Moore and stuff. How's he going to beat out?
But he can't. I mean, some games he was.
Look, man. I loved having Curtis Samuel in Dynasty last year. I think he's great. He's not a Terry McLaurin. I think he would tell
he's
you.
Not a Terry McLaurin, but depending on the quarterback play, Terry McLaurin might not be Terry McLaurin. I feel like Curtis Samuel's the kind of guy that you don't need to.
Fitzpatrick's perfect for Terry McLaurin. Fitzpatrick is perfect for Terry McLaurin. And Fitzpatrick feeds his number one wide receiver. 9.7 targets per game go to his number one wide receiver.
And you feel like Fitzpatrick's going to be the guy all season?
He's going to be the guy until he's not the guy. Who else is going to be? I mean, if they put in Kyle Allen loves Terry McLaurin. Kyle Allen will have a small bit of built-in rapport, I guess.
I mean, I'm saying Fitzpatrick's arm can't be getting any better. Oh. It was always a Fitz PP. I just feel like Curtis Samuel's one of those guys that, like Brandon Cooks, I mean, you can do anything you ask of him.
It's a pretty contrarian take, Trash Man, to say that Terry McLaurin's not going to benefit greatly from the changes in this offense. I mean, he's gonna benefit a lot. Having a quarterback like Fitzpatrick that is so just conducive to fantasy success and it also extends to his wide receiver too. And I was on this podcast last week with the guy. And
you don't think Samuel's going to be his wide receiver too?
He will be, because we were on here last week talking who's going to be the wide receiver two, because the wide receiver two on even these guys like Preston Williams or these dirt balls that Quincy Enunwa or all these guys. These guys had good years. And we said, well, who is that going to be? Let's see if we can mine out who that was. We came up with, was it going to be Cam Sims or Kelvin Harmon or something? Like, that's not in anymore. Like, these guys had 4.3 speed on both of the outsides. They'll have Logan Thomas probably inside, who would be the big body that he could throw the kind of those DGAF contested catch balls to, like we saw he used to do to Mike Evans and the like, right? And then Devontae Parker and the like. I don't think that there's that type of prototype wide receiver on the football team, but I think Logan Thomas could fit in there. They're going to be fast. Those two guys are 4.3 on the outside. Antonio Gibson runs a 4.3.
Yeah,
so it's going to be. I think it's going to be a better offense than people think, and I think a lot of it has to do with Fitzpatrick. One of the landing spots. You're right, Trash Man. A lot of these landing spots are kind of blah. I mean, I think that Chris Carson going back to Seattle is about as good as he could have hoped for. Built-in familiarity there.
I was looking more at players on new teams than I was guys who got re-signed.
What about? If we're looking at players on new teams, I like Kenny Galladay to the Giants. I think that's a good. I think that's
do.
Good. Yeah.
More than you liked him in Detroit.
Well, I mean. With Goff?
Then he's been doing in Detroit.
Well, but maybe.
You think there'll be an improvement on a healthy Kenny Galladay? You feel like he'll do better in New York than he's been doing in Detroit?
I think he will if Daniel Jones can be what they want Daniel Jones to be.
Daniel Jones, I was looking at a stat. He was maybe threw the least balls over 20 yards last season.
Well, they're probably looking to change that, and they don't think that Darius Slayton's going to be the one to do it.
Darius Slayton, that makes me sick for Darius Slayton.
Yeah, but I think that New York is about as good. How many other spots, Trashman, can you think of where you could say yes, they need an alpha number one wide receiver, they need an outside X alpha wide receiver? It's like you start making a list, and it's the Giants, and really who else?
The Raiders.
Okay. Maybe the Eagles.
The Eagles. The 49ers.
No, they play positionless, man. They like having those guys that can play X and move inside of the slot and everything. They're kind of like the Chiefs. They don't want one of these big dudes. They want the big tight end. It's the same with the Raiders.
You could say, well,
there's not many. That's what I'm saying. So I thought that it was a good landing spot for Kenny Galladay. Any others before we go to the bad landing spots?
I think potentially Corey Davis to the Jets
was good.
I mean, I think him opposite Mims, that could be a devastating dude. I think he might be more consistent as a Jet than he was as a Titan.
We'll see who the quarterback is.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, what if they draft Justin Fields or they draft Wilson or something? There could be a breaking in period there with him. But Corey Davis certainly earned his money, and whatever they do, they're trying. Like I've always said, if you draft a young quarterback, you have a young quarterback that you want to surround him with weapons. I never understand this stuff where you draft these two guys at the same time. You draft a young wide receiver with a young quarterback. It's like, I don't think that's the way to do it. I think the way to do it is to use that savings from the young quarterback and go get veteran weapons to surround him with. And so that could be what they're doing there with those guys. All right. Those are the spots that you like. As far as the spots that you don't like, what do you got?
Well, Kenny Golladay was one of the ones I didn't love. But Will Fuller in Miami. I don't know.
Do you think that Tua Tagovailoa is ever going to return back to the guy that we saw in like that national championship game that just was murking fools down the field and it's like that's what they're hoping for. Talk about a guy that they've surrounded with talent. I mean, they've
got to get that confidence. But I think maybe not having a Fitzpatrick breathing down his neck, maybe that'll allow him to be more confident.
Well, right, but I understand that, but do you think do you think Tua has it in him still? Did the hip thing just mess everything up? Was he never that good?
I mean, it's hard to tell with young players like that.
Well, of course it's hard to tell, but we're analysts and it's our job to try and figure it out. What do you think, Trashman? Do you think Tua sucks?
I don't think Tua sucks.
One place that let's see, I'm trying to think here, the free agent landing spots that I did not like.
I didn't like Kenyon Drake to the Raiders.
Oh, no. Of course I hated that. Let's see.
Michael Y is asking, does Fuller hurt Parker much?
Yes.
He doesn't help him.
Of course he does. I didn't like Marvin Jones to the Jaguars.
Yeah.
I think it killed. I think it hurts Laviska Shenault. I think it hurts DJ Chark. I liked Carlos Hyde to the Jaguars. That just means that James Robinson's not going to get any carries taken away by that old man.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Marvin Jones is like another Keelan Cole. Like I don't think it hurts Laviska as much, but Chark, I think it definitely. Yeah, I don't know that he's the alpha receiver, the number one there anymore.
Trashman, how could you not have listed the single worst development in all of free agency for fantasy that tanked not only one great player's value, but two great players' value, the two best players at their position on the entire board as far as free agents? And Bill Belichick,
the Patriots?
Bill Belichick decides. He wants to go in and he wants to say, I not only want to ruin Jonnusmith's value, but I want to ruin Hunter Henry's value at the same time, because there's no way that offense commandeered by that quarterback.
I was torn. I was like, either both of these guys are going to be the premier pass catchers on that offense, or they're going to eat into each other's value.
Trashman. What is the law that says like the easiest possible explanation is probably the goddamn explanation?
Well, we have seen in the past with Aaron Hernandez and Gronkowski that you can have two productive receivers in New England. Bill Belichick likes that, but we don't have the same quarterback that was working with both those guys.
Oh yeah, and there certainly isn't much difference between peak Tom Brady and decrepit skeleton of his old self, Cam Newton, that blames the COVID fog for as bad as he was last year.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's I feel like in theory, Belichick could make it work. but I think he may be deceiving himself.
He could make it. He could make it work. Trashman. I could go out. I could go out and win the.
Well, what I say, there's a sample for it. We have seen it work for him before.
Yes, and do what the other sample is. And Mike Clay tweeted this out since 2010. There have been like 2 examples of teams producing 2 tight end ones for fantasy that both come from the same exact team. I'm going to tell you what happened. Bill Belichick had a bad year, and he wanted to take it out on all of the fantasy world, especially people like me that own Hunter Henry and Dynasty. And he wanted to say, I'm going to let you pay up $12.5 million per year over 4 years for Jonnu, over 3 years for Hunter Henry. By the time they're out of this deal, they're going to be old men that you can't use anymore, and your tight end situation, especially in Dynasty, is fucked.